A life of untouchable luxury shatters in an instant when a millionaire heir, his ego poisoned by the manipulations of his mistress, turns on his family in a rage he refuses to control. He clenches a fist and drives it into the stomach of his pregnant wife. Convinced that his family name and vast fortune can bury the truth forever, he thinks his status will protect him. He thinks money and influence can hide his guilt. But he has forgotten one thing. This woman is not who he thinks she is. She has a brother who is a mafia boss, a man who answers to no law. And when he returns, justice will not come in a courtroom, it will hit Sebastian fast and brutally before he even sees the shadow falling over him. What follows is a whirlwind of underworld power, blood loyalty, and crushing retribution that will grip you from the very first moment of this story. The night in the sprawling city penthouse was quiet in the way only immense wealth can buy. The floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the skyline, casting the marble floors in a cold, silvery glow. Inside this cage of glass and gold, Isabel Harrington stood alone in the living room. One hand gently resting on her pregnant belly. She whispered softly to the child growing inside her, telling the little one that everything would be all right. She believed that hope was still possible. Earlier that day, she had seen the new ultrasound at the private clinic. The heartbeat had been strong. The image had made her smile through her tears. She imagined sharing that joy with her husband. Isabel waited for Sebastian Crown to come home. She had prepared the evening with the perfection he demanded. The dinner was set, the lights were dim, and the air was still. She thought that maybe tonight he would look at her with kindness. Maybe tonight he would remember the man he pretended to be when they met. The one she had married. But as the minutes dragged on, the silence felt heavier, like a predator waiting in the dark. Then the heavy double doors slammed open with violent force. Sebastian stopped in the middle of the living room. His eyes moved from Isabel to the carefully set table, the candles, the wine. A bitter laugh escaped his throat. "Look at this," he said, his voice dripping with mockery. "She's playing the perfect wife." Bianca stepped inside behind him, her heels clicking against the marble. She did not sit. She leaned against the wall near the elevator, arms crossed, watching with quiet amusement. Isabel tried to steady her voice. "Sebastian, I thought we could talk tonight. Just the two of us." "Talk." Sebastian moved closer. The smell of whiskey clung to him. "Talk about what, Isabel? Talk about how you've been lying to me for months." Isabel shook her head, confusion flooding her face. "I don't understand. What lies?" "Sebastian, please. The baby." He spat the word like poison. "Bianca told me everything. The timing doesn't add up. You were with someone else, weren't you? You thought you could trap me with another man's child." Isabel's heart stopped. She looked past Sebastian to Bianca, who offered nothing but a small, satisfied smile. "That's not true," Isabel whispered. Her hand pressed harder against her belly. "Sebastian, this is your baby. I have never been with anyone else. She's lying to you. Can't you see what she's doing?" Sebastian's face twisted. He grabbed Isabel's arm and pulled her toward him. His grip was bruising. "Don't you dare call her a liar," he hissed. "You're the one who's been playing games. You thought my family's name would protect you. You thought you could use me." Tears streamed down Isabel's cheeks. "Please. You're hurting me. Think about the baby." "I don't want to hear about that baby." He released her arm, and for one moment, Isabel thought it was over. She took a breath. She stepped back. Then Sebastian's fist connected with her stomach. The force of the blow drove every fragment of air from her lungs. Pain exploded through her abdomen, sharp and blinding. Her legs gave out beneath her. She collapsed onto the marble floor, her pale dress pooling around her like a dying flower. Her hands clutched her belly as a sob tore from her throat. She tried to speak. She tried to beg. But no words came. Only gasping, broken sounds. Sebastian stood over her for a long moment. His chest heaved. His fist was still clenched. Then he turned and walked toward the elevator without looking back. Bianca lingered a moment longer. She tilted her head, studying Isabel on the floor the way one might observe an insect. Then she followed Sebastian into the elevator. The doors closed with a soft chime. Isabel lay alone on the cold marble. Blood began to stain the edges of her dress. The candles still flickered on the table. The music still played. Minutes passed. Maybe longer. Then the service door opened. Maria, the evening maid, stepped into the penthouse carrying fresh linens. She saw Isabel on the floor and screamed. The linens fell. Maria dropped to her knees beside Isabel, crying out in Spanish, pressing her hands uselessly against the blood. "Stay awake, Mrs. Crown. Stay with me." Maria fumbled for her phone and dialed 911. Her voice shook as she begged for an ambulance. She gave the address. She described the blood. She described the pregnant woman fading on the floor. Isabel's vision blurred. She felt Maria's hand gripping hers. She heard sirens in the distance, growing closer. Her lips moved. A single word escaped in a broken whisper. "Baby." Then darkness swallowed her whole. The first thing Isabel heard was the beeping. Steady. Rhythmic. A machine counting the seconds she was still alive. She opened her eyes slowly. The light above her was harsh and white. The smell of antiseptic filled her nose. Tubes ran from her arms to monitors she could not fully see. Her body felt heavy, as though it belonged to someone else. A nurse noticed her stirring and moved quickly to her side. "Mrs. Crown, can you hear me? You're in the ICU at Mount Sinai. You've been unconscious for several hours." Isabel tried to speak, but her throat was raw. She swallowed painfully and forced the words out. "My baby." The nurse hesitated. That hesitation told Isabel everything she needed to know. "The doctor will be here shortly to explain. Please try to stay calm." But Isabel could not stay calm. Her hand moved to her stomach. The swelling was still there. The baby was still inside her. But something was wrong. She could feel it in the silence where there should have been movement. A doctor entered the room moments later. His face was kind but worn, the face of a man who had delivered difficult news too many times. "Mrs. Crown, I'm Dr. Reyes. You suffered significant abdominal trauma. We've managed to stabilize you, but the baby experienced considerable distress." Isabel's vision blurred with tears. "Is my baby alive?" "Yes. But the next 24 hours are critical. We're monitoring the heartbeat closely. It's weak, but it's there. Your child is fighting." Isabel closed her eyes. A sob escaped her chest. She had almost lost everything. She had almost lost the only thing that mattered. Dar. Reyes spoke again, gently. "Mrs. Crown, we need to contact your next of kin. Is there someone we can call? A family member who can be here with you?" Isabel's mind went to Sebastian. Then to his family. The Crowns would send lawyers, not comfort. They would protect their name, not her. There was only one person who would come for her. One person she had spent years running from. One person she had tried to forget. She opened her eyes and looked at the doctor. Nicholas Varelli. The name felt foreign on her tongue. She had not spoken it aloud in 5 years. She had buried it along with everything else from her old life. "He's my brother." The doctor wrote down the name and left to make the call. 300 miles away, in a private office overlooking the Boston Harbor, a phone rang. Nicholas Varelli sat behind a heavy oak desk. His shirt was open at the collar, revealing the dark ink of tattoos that climbed his chest. His face was carved from stone, sharp and unreadable. Two enforcers stood near the door, silent as shadows. He answered on the second ring. The voice on the other end was professional and clinical. It delivered the facts without emotion. Assault. Trauma. Pregnancy at risk. Critical condition. Nicholas did not interrupt. He did not ask questions. He listened until the voice finished, then ended the call without a word. For a long moment, he sat motionless. Then he stood. He walked to the coat rack near the window and lifted his trench coat. He pulled it over his shoulders slowly, deliberately. The leather creaked as he adjusted the collar. One of the enforcers stepped forward. "Boss?" Nicholas turned. His eyes were cold, but something burned beneath the surface. Something ancient and dangerous. "Prepare the jet. We're going to New York." The enforcer nodded and disappeared through the door. Nicholas remained by the window, staring out at the harbor. The city lights reflected off the black water. His sister had run from him. She had changed her name. She had married into a world of silk and silver, hoping to escape the blood that ran through her veins. But blood does not forget. And neither did Nicholas Varelli. He buttoned his coat and walked toward the door. His footsteps were slow and measured, the footsteps of a man who had no need to hurry. The beast was awake. And someone was going to pay. The private jet touched down at Teterboro Airport just after midnight. A black SUV waited on the tarmac, engine running, headlights cutting through the darkness. Nicholas Varelli stepped off the plane without a word. His trench coat billowed in the cold wind. Two enforcers followed close behind, their faces hard and expressionless. They moved like men who had done this before. Men who understood that silence was more dangerous than threats. The drive to Mount Sinai took less than 30 minutes. The city blurred past the tinted windows. Nicholas did not speak. He sat perfectly still, his hands resting on his knees, his eyes fixed on nothing. But his mind was working. 5 years. 5 years since Isabel had walked away from the family. 5 years since she had begged him to let her go, to let her build a life that did not smell of gunpowder and blood. He had granted her wish. He had let her disappear into a world of charity galas and penthouse apartments. And this was how that world had repaid her. The SUV pulled up to the hospital entrance. Nicholas stepped out before the vehicle had fully stopped. The enforcers flanked him immediately, one on each side. Together, they walked through the automatic doors and into the sterile brightness of the lobby. Nurses looked up from their stations. Security guards straightened in their chairs. Something in the air shifted. The three men moved with a quiet authority that demanded attention without asking for it. Nicholas approached the front desk. His voice was low and calm. "Isabel Harrington. ICU." The receptionist stammered, glancing at the enforcers. "Are you family, sir?" "I'm her brother." She typed quickly, her fingers trembling on the keyboard. "4th floor. Room 412. I'll need you to sign in." But Nicholas was already walking toward the elevators. The enforcers followed. The receptionist did not try to stop them. On the 4th floor, the ICU was quiet. Monitors beeped behind closed doors. A few nurses moved between rooms, their footsteps soft on the linoleum. Nicholas found room 412. He paused outside the door, his hand resting on the frame. Through the small window, he could see Isabel lying in the bed. Tubes connected her to machines. Her face was pale. Her eyes were closed. Something tightened in his chest. Something he had not felt in years. He reached for the door handle. "Excuse me. You can't go in there." The voice came from behind him. Nicholas turned slowly. Sebastian Crown stood at the end of the corridor. He wore a tailored suit, not a wrinkle in sight. His hair was perfectly styled. His shoes gleamed under the fluorescent lights. He looked like a man who had never been told no in his entire life. 2 hospital security guards flanked him, uncertain but obedient. Sebastian walked closer, his chin raised. "I'm her husband. I have every right to see her. Whoever you are, you need to leave." Nicholas did not move. He studied Sebastian the way a predator studies wounded prey. His eyes traveled from the polished shoes to the expensive watch to the arrogant tilt of the jaw. Then he smiled. It was not a kind smile. "You're Sebastian Crown." Sebastian faltered, just for a moment. "How do you know my name?" Nicholas stepped forward. The enforcers shifted behind him, their presence filling the corridor like a storm cloud. "I know many things about you, Mr. Crown. I know about your father's real estate empire. I know about your accounts in the Caymans. I know about the woman in the green dress." Sebastian's face went pale. His confidence cracked, just slightly. Nicholas took another step. They were close now. Close enough that Sebastian could see the tattoos climbing above his collar. Close enough to see the scar that ran along his jaw. Close enough to smell the danger radiating from him like heat from a furnace. "But most importantly," Nicholas said, his voice dropping to a whisper, "I know what you did to my sister." Sebastian's mouth opened, but no words came out. His eyes darted to the security guards, but they had already stepped back. They wanted no part of this. Nicholas leaned closer. "Walk away, Mr. Crown. Walk away now. Because if you take one more step toward that door, I will break every bone in your hand. And that will only be the beginning." Sebastian stared at him. For the first time in his life, he understood what it meant to be powerless. He understood what it meant to face something that money could not buy or intimidate. He turned and walked away without another word. Nicholas watched him disappear around the corner. Then he opened the door to room 412 and stepped inside. His sister was still unconscious. The machines beeped steadily. Her hand lay limp on the white sheets. Nicholas sat down in the chair beside her bed. He took her hand gently in his. "I'm here now," he said quietly. "No one will ever hurt you again." Isabel woke to the soft glow of morning light filtering through the hospital blinds. Her body ached. Her mind felt slow and heavy. But when she turned her head, she saw him. Nicholas sat in the chair beside her bed. His trench coat hung over the armrest. His eyes were fixed on her, calm and patient, as though he had been waiting for hours. Perhaps he had. "Nicholas." Her voice cracked. He leaned forward and took her hand. His grip was firm but gentle. "I'm here, Isabel. I'm not going anywhere." Tears spilled down her cheeks. She had spent 5 years running from this man, from this life. And now, in her darkest moment, he was the only one who had come. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry I left." Nicholas shook his head slowly. "You have nothing to apologize for. You wanted a different life. I understood. But that life is over now. And I will make sure the people who did this to you never forget what it cost them." Before Isabel could respond, her phone buzzed on the bedside table. Then again. Then again. Nicholas glanced at the screen. His jaw tightened. "May I?" Isabel nodded. He picked up the phone and scrolled through the messages. His expression did not change, but something cold settled behind his eyes. The messages were from an unknown number. But the words made the sender unmistakable. "Keep your mouth shut if you know what's good for you. Sebastian's family will bury you in court. You'll lose everything. No one will believe a lying little housewife over a crown. Drop this now, or I'll make sure you regret it. Nicholas read each message slowly. Then he set the phone down and looked at Isabel. Bianca Lorne. Isabel nodded, her hands trembling. She was there that night. She watched him do it. She didn't lift a finger to help me. Nicholas stood. He walked to the window and looked out at the city below. His voice was quiet when he spoke. She made a mistake. She thought she was threatening a woman alone. She didn't know she was threatening my family. He pulled out his own phone and sent a single text. Within seconds, a reply appeared. We have her location, Nicholas said. She's at the Crown Estate in the Hamptons. Playing house while you lie in a hospital bed. Isabel closed her eyes. The weight of everything pressed down on her. The betrayal. The violence. The cruelty. But beneath the pain, something else stirred. Something harder. I want to give my statement, she said. Nicholas turned to face her. I'm done hiding, Isabel continued. I'm done protecting him. I'm done pretending I'm not a Varelli. Nicholas studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. Within the hour, a detective arrived at the hospital room. Nicholas stood near the door, arms crossed, silent and watchful. Isabel told the detective everything. She described the months of manipulation. The whispers from Bianca. The growing cruelty from Sebastian. She described the night of the assault in unflinching detail. The punch. The fall. The blood on the marble floor. When the detective asked about her family, Isabel did not hesitate. My maiden name is Varelli. My brother is Nicholas Varelli. He is my next of kin. The detective paused, pen hovering above the notepad. Recognition flickered in his eyes. He glanced toward Nicholas, then quickly looked away. Understood, Mrs. Crown. When the detective left, Nicholas returned to her bedside. You did well, he said. Isabel looked up at him. Her voice was steady now. What happens to Bianca? Nicholas smiled, but there was no warmth in it. She wanted to send you a message. Now I will send her one. Nicholas Varelli did not believe in courts. Courts were slow. Courts were uncertain. Courts could be bought by men with enough money and the right connections. Fear, on the other hand, was immediate. Fear was universal. Fear could not be appealed. The dismantling of Sebastian Crown's empire began quietly. No lawyers filed motions. No press releases announced investigations. Instead, phone calls were made in the dead of night. Visits were paid to men in corner offices who owed favors they had hoped would never be collected. Within 48 hours, Sebastian discovered that his primary bank account had been frozen. Not by the government. Not by any court order. Simply frozen. When he called his banker, the man stammered apologies and blamed a technical error that could not be resolved. When Sebastian demanded to speak to a supervisor, the line went dead. He tried his backup accounts. Same result. His credit cards were declined at a coffee shop. His wire transfers bounced. His financial empire, built on his father's name and decades of carefully cultivated relationships, was suddenly locked behind doors that would not open. Sebastian raged. He threatened. He called in every favor he had ever earned. No one answered. The security team was next. Sebastian employed 6 men to guard the Crown Estate in the Hamptons. Former military. Former police. Men who were paid well to ask no questions. One by one, they resigned. The first claimed a family emergency. The second said he had received a better offer. By the third resignation, Sebastian stopped believing the excuses. By the 6th, he understood the truth. Someone had gotten to them. Someone had made it clear that protecting Sebastian Crown was no longer a safe occupation. He stood alone in his father's study, surrounded by paintings worth millions, and felt the walls closing in. Meanwhile, Nicholas worked from a suite at the Pierre Hotel. His enforcers came and went with information, each piece adding to the picture he was building. The breakthrough came on the third day. One of his men had gained access to Bianca Lorne's phone records. Another had obtained security footage from a restaurant in Midtown where Bianca had met with a man 2 weeks before the assault. The man was a private investigator. The same investigator who had produced the forged paternity test. Nicholas watched the footage on a laptop screen. Bianca sat across from the investigator, sliding an envelope across the table. Her lips moved, and though there was no audio, the meaning was clear. She had paid for the lie. She had manufactured the evidence that convinced Sebastian the baby was not his. She had orchestrated the assault from the shadows, knowing exactly what Sebastian would do when his ego was threatened. Nicholas closed the laptop slowly. Bianca Lorne had not simply watched a pregnant woman be beaten. She had planned it. She had wanted Isabel broken, discarded, removed from the picture so she could take her place. One of the enforcers stepped forward. "What do you want us to do with her, boss?" Nicholas was silent for a long moment. Then he spoke. "Nothing yet. I want her comfortable. I want her confident. I want her to believe she has gotten away with everything." He stood and walked to the window, looking out at Central Park below. "The gala is in 4 days. Sebastian will attend. He always does. It's his chance to save face, to pretend nothing is wrong." Nicholas turned back to his men. "We will be there too. And when the moment is right, we will show the world exactly who Sebastian Crown and Bianca Lorne really are." The enforcer nodded. Nicholas returned his gaze to the city. Let them enjoy these last few days of peace. It will make the fall that much sweeter. Sebastian Crown had never known desperation. He had grown up in a world where problems were solved with phone calls and checkbooks. Where doors opened at the mention of his family name. Where consequences were things that happened to other people. Now he understood how wrong he had been. 3 days had passed since his accounts were frozen. 3 days of unanswered calls and cancelled meetings. 3 days of watching his empire crumble like sand through his fingers. He needed to leave. He needed to disappear until this storm passed. His father had a villa in Monaco. No one would find him there. He could regroup, hire new lawyers, mount a counterattack from a safe distance. Sebastian threw clothes into a suitcase with shaking hands. He did not bother folding them. He did not care about appearances anymore. He just needed to get out. He called his driver to arrange a car to the airport. The phone rang 6 times before going to voicemail. He tried again. Same result. He tried the backup driver. No answer. Fine. He would drive himself. Sebastian grabbed his keys and walked to the garage. His Porsche sat gleaming under the lights. He climbed inside, started the engine, and pulled out onto the long driveway. He stopped at a gas station 20 minutes later. The tank was nearly empty. He inserted his credit card at the pump. Declined. He tried another card. Declined. He tried a third. Declined. Sebastian stared at the screen, his reflection ghostly in the black glass. His hands began to tremble. He had millions in assets. Properties. Investments. Art. And yet he could not buy a tank of gas. He drove back to the estate on fumes, his mind racing with questions he could not answer. When he arrived, the house was dark. The staff had left hours ago. No security patrolled the grounds. He was alone. Sebastian walked through the front door and flicked on the lights. He froze. There, on the marble floor of the foyer, lay a baseball bat. Not just any bat. His bat. The one he kept in the closet of his study. The one he had grabbed that night when Bianca's words had driven him into a rage he could not control. But it was not whole anymore. The bat had been snapped cleanly in half. The two pieces lay crossed over each other, forming an X on the cold white marble. Sebastian's blood turned to ice. He looked around wildly. The house was silent. No footsteps. No shadows moving in the corners. But someone had been here. Someone had walked through his home, found the bat, and left this message for him to find. He thought of the man at the hospital. The tattooed stranger with the cold eyes who had blocked his path to Isabel's room. The man who had whispered threats without raising his voice. Nicholas Varelli. Sebastian backed away from the broken bat. His breathing grew ragged. His heart pounded against his ribs. He was not facing a business rival. He was not facing a jealous ex or an angry investor. He was facing something far older and far darker. Something that operated outside the rules he had always relied on. He was being hunted. Sebastian stumbled into his study and locked the door behind him. He pulled the curtains closed and sat in the darkness, his back against the wall. For the first time in his life, Sebastian Crown understood what it meant to be prey. And somewhere out there, the predator was waiting. The Vanderbilt Grand Ballroom glittered with the light of 1,000 chandeliers. Crystal glasses clinked. Diamonds sparkled on powdered necks. The elite of New York society moved through the room in waves of silk and tailored wool, their laughter echoing off marble columns. Sebastian Crown stood near the bar, a glass of whiskey in his hand. He wore his finest suit. His hair was perfectly styled. His smile was firmly in place. But his eyes betrayed him. They darted to every doorway. They lingered on every unfamiliar face. He had not slept in 2 days. The broken bat still haunted his thoughts. He had almost stayed home. Almost surrendered to the fear that had taken root in his chest. But staying home meant admitting defeat. It meant letting the whispers win. So he came. He shook hands. He laughed at jokes he did not hear. He pretended that everything was fine. Bianca stood beside him in a floor-length red gown. She smiled and charmed and played her role perfectly. But even she seemed nervous tonight. Her eyes kept moving to the exits. The gala was a charity event for children's hospitals. The mayor was in attendance. So were senators, CEOs, and old money families who traced their lineages back to the Mayflower. Sebastian told himself he was safe here. No one would dare touch him in a room full of this much power. He was wrong. At precisely 9 o'clock, the lights flickered. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Guests looked up at the chandeliers, confused. The orchestra stopped playing. The room fell into an uncertain silence. Then the main doors swung shut with a heavy thud. Sebastian turned. His glass slipped from his fingers and shattered on the marble floor. Nicholas Varelli walked through a side entrance onto the stage at the front of the ballroom. His trench coat was gone. He wore a black suit that fit him like armor. The tattoos on his neck were visible above his collar. 2 enforcers followed behind him, their faces hard as stone. The crowd parted instinctively. No one spoke. No one moved. Nicholas stepped up to the microphone. His voice was calm, unhurried, and utterly controlled. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the interruption. But there is something you all need to see. He raised one hand. The massive screens behind him flickered to life. Sebastian's blood went cold. The footage was grainy but unmistakable. It showed the penthouse living room. Isabel stood in her pale dress, her hand on her belly. Sebastian faced her, his fist clenched. The audio crackled through the speakers. I don't want to hear about that baby. Then the punch. The sickening sound of impact. Isabel crumpling to the floor. her pale dress pooling around her. Her hands clutching her stomach as she gasped for air. The camera captured everything. Sebastian standing over her. Bianca stepping into frame, watching without emotion. Sebastian walking away without looking back. The video ended. The screens went dark. The silence in the ballroom was absolute. Nicholas turned to face the crowd. His eyes found Sebastian in the sea of horrified faces. This man, Nicholas said, his voice carrying through the room, beat his pregnant wife because his mistress told him lies. He left her bleeding on the floor. He thought his money would protect him. Nicholas smiled. It was the coldest smile Sebastian had ever seen. He was wrong. The ballroom erupted into chaos. Guests stumbled backward, their faces twisted in horror and disgust. Women clutched their pearls. Men shook their heads in disbelief. The footage had stripped away every mask Sebastian had ever worn. Sebastian's mind raced. He needed to regain control. He needed to stop this before it destroyed everything. "Security," he shouted, his voice cracking. "Get this man off the stage. Remove him now." He looked toward the doors where the event security had been stationed. 4 men in black suits stood in position. But they did not move. They did not even look at him. They looked at Nicholas. One of them gave a small nod toward the stage. Sebastian's stomach dropped. The security team had been replaced. Bought. Turned. Every guard in the room now worked for the man who was dismantling his life piece by piece. Nicholas stepped closer to the microphone. His voice remained calm, almost conversational, as though he were discussing the weather. Sebastian Crown comes from a family that has built its fortune on reputation. On trust. On the belief that the Crown name stands for integrity. He paused, letting the words settle over the silent crowd. But there is no integrity in a man who beats a pregnant woman. There is no honor in a coward who raises his fist to the mother of his child because his mistress whispered lies into his ear. Nicholas turned slightly, his gaze finding Bianca in the crowd. She stood frozen, her red gown suddenly looking like a target. And speaking of the mistress, Bianca Lorne did not simply watch the assault. She orchestrated it. She paid for a forged paternity test. She planted the lies that drove Sebastian to violence. She stood in that penthouse and smiled while my sister bled on the floor. Gasps rippled through the room. Heads turned toward Bianca. The guests who had stood near her moments ago now stepped away, leaving her isolated in a growing circle of empty space. Bianca's face went pale. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. "I have evidence of every transaction," Nicholas continued. "Every phone call. Every meeting with the private investigator she hired to destroy an innocent woman's life." He looked back at Sebastian, who stood paralyzed near the bar. "You thought your money made you untouchable. You thought your name would shield you from consequences. But names can be destroyed. Fortunes can vanish. And men who hurt women I love can be broken." The sound of sirens pierced the silence. Moments later, the main doors swung open. A team of police officers entered the ballroom, led by 2 detectives in plain clothes. They moved with purpose, weaving through the stunned crowd. The lead detective approached Sebastian. His voice was flat and professional. "Sebastian Crown, you are under arrest for aggravated assault and domestic violence. You have the right to remain silent." Sebastian tried to speak, but the words died in his throat. The officer turned him around and secured handcuffs around his wrists. The cold metal bit into his skin. Across the room, another officer approached Bianca. "Bianca Lorne, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit assault and fraud." Bianca screamed. She tried to pull away, but the officer held her firmly. Her perfect composure shattered completely. Tears streamed down her face, smearing her makeup into dark rivers. This is a mistake. I didn't do anything. Sebastian, tell them. But Sebastian did not respond. He stared straight ahead, his face empty, as officers led him toward the exit. The crowd watched in stunned silence. Cameras flashed. Phones recorded. By morning, the footage would be on every news channel and social media platform in the country. Nicholas stepped down from the stage. He walked through the parting crowd without a word, his enforcers falling into step behind him. At the door, he paused and looked back at the ballroom one final time. Sebastian and Bianca were gone, escorted into the flashing lights of police cars outside. The guests remained frozen, still processing the destruction they had witnessed. Nicholas allowed himself a small, satisfied nod. Then he disappeared into the night. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Every news channel carried the footage from the gala. Every tabloid printed the images of Sebastian Crown in handcuffs, his face hollow and defeated. The man who had once commanded rooms with his presence now sat slumped in a defendant's chair, stripped of his tailored suits and replaced with prison orange. The evidence was overwhelming. The security footage from the penthouse. The recordings of Bianca's meetings with the private investigator. The forged paternity test traced back to a bribed lab technician. The threatening messages sent to Isabel's phone. Sebastian's lawyers tried everything. They claimed emotional distress. They blamed alcohol. They pointed fingers at Bianca. But nothing worked. The jury saw the footage. They heard Isabel's testimony. They watched Sebastian's fist connect with the stomach of a pregnant woman. The verdict came on a cold December morning. Guilty on all counts. Aggravated assault. Domestic violence. Attempted harm to an unborn child. The judge sentenced Sebastian to 18 years in federal prison. His family's name was ruined. Their business partners fled. The Crown Empire, built over 3 generations, collapsed in a matter of months. Bianca fared no better. Her conspiracy charges carried a sentence of 12 years. She screamed when the verdict was read, insisting she had been manipulated, that Sebastian had forced her into everything. No one believed her. The evidence painted a different picture. She had been the architect of the assault, not the victim. As officers led her from the courtroom, Bianca looked nothing like the confident woman in the tight green dress who had once watched Isabel bleed on the marble floor. Her face was gaunt. Her eyes were empty. The future she had schemed for had turned to ash. Thousands of miles away, Isabel Harrington stood on a sunlit terrace overlooking the Amalfi Coast. The villa belonged to Nicholas. It sat nestled among lemon groves and ancient stone walls, hidden from the world by winding roads and private gates. The air smelled of salt and citrus. The only sounds were the distant crash of waves and the singing of birds in the olive trees. Isabel wore a simple white dress. Her hair fell loose around her shoulders. The bruises had faded months ago. The fear had taken longer, but it too had begun to release its grip. In her arms, she held her daughter. The baby was 3 months old now. Born healthy and strong, despite everything. She had her mother's dark hair and her grandmother's eyes. Isabel had named her Elena, after the Italian word for light. Nicholas stood in the doorway behind her, watching in silence. He had given her space to heal. He had asked nothing of her except that she rest and recover. But he was always nearby. Always watching. Always protecting. Isabel turned to face him. A soft smile crossed her lips. "Thank you," she said. "For everything." Nicholas shook his head slowly. "You are my sister. There is nothing to thank." He walked to her side and looked down at the baby. For a moment, the hardness in his face softened. He reached out and gently touched Elena's tiny hand. "She is beautiful," he said quietly. Isabel nodded. Tears pricked at her eyes, but they were not tears of sorrow. They were tears of relief. Of gratitude. Of a future she had once believed was lost. She looked out at the shimmering sea below. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. She had survived. Her daughter had survived. The man who had tried to destroy them was locked away, forgotten by a world that had once worshipped his name. Isabel pressed a gentle kiss to Elena's forehead. "We made it," she whispered. "We're safe now." The waves crashed softly against the cliffs. The wind carried the scent of jasmine through the terrace. And for the first time in years, Isabel Harrington felt at peace. Her pain had become her strength. And her new life had finally begun. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe now and hit that notification bell so you never miss another incredible story.